Especially coming off of the 40th ECTRIMS, where there's so much research that's been shared, and it's just very cool to see the cross-section between patients and clinicians in the same place, where we can exchange information, knowledge, and make new friends and leave with a new community.
It was really important for me to hear on a number of occasions that we are talking years, not decades.
Well, it was incredible to see a room filled with patients and caregivers. I don't think there was an empty seat. So I was very impressed by how many people showed up in person, but I think more impressive how many people showed up online.
Hope without a plan is just a dream. We live, all of us, with these conditions with a certain level of hope. We have to, just to get up and get through the next day. But today, and for me over the previous several days, I've seen a plan in place, so it's not just a dream.
Hi, my name is Sumaira. I am a patient living with seronegative neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder, also known as NMOSD. I am based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm also the founder and executive director of the Sumaira Foundation.
I'm Trevis Gleason. I am a person living with multiple sclerosis. I do a bit of writing, I do a bit of blogging about the topic, and other than that, I suppose it could be said that I do as little as possible. And I live in County Kerry, Ireland.
And I'm Brett Drummond. You're listening to the ECTRIMS podcast, the official podcast from the European Committee for Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis. Welcome to part 2 of our special ECTRIMS podcast series on the 2024 ECTRIMS Patient Community Day. Today, on this episode, I'm joined by 2 very special guests, Trevis and Sumaira. Trevis, a person living with MS, and Sumaira, a person living with NMOSD. They're going to be sharing their unique insights into what has just happened at the 2024 ECTRIMS Patient Community Day. So we've just come from our Patient Community Day event. I think to start with, what would be interesting for our listeners is for the both of you just to sort of describe why you were attending the event.
Because I love to meet patients. I love to learn more about what's going on in the field of neuroimmunology, what's the latest, especially coming off of the 40th ECTRIMS, where there's so much research that's been shared. And it's just very cool to see the cross-section between patients and clinicians in the same place, where we can exchange information, knowledge, and make new friends and leave with a new community.
I wouldn't disagree with any of that. And I think it's important for us as people living with conditions, in this case, living with MS, that we educate ourselves. I know that my experience with medical professionals is that if I can speak a bit of their language and then understand the replies, that the level of conversation, the level of service, the level of treatment that I get, I find is a little bit better. So I'm trying to improve my own patient experience, but I'm also then hoping to translate that out to other people living with the condition through whatever vehicles I might have, so that they might have better experiences as well.
And so I guess thinking about it from the other perspective around the importance of having the event in general, I'd love to hear from both of you around, this was obviously the 3rd time that this event has been run at ECTRIMS at the conclusion of the conference. I'd love to hear your thoughts around the importance of the fact that ECTRIMS has included this as a really critical part of the calendar.
Well, I think it's a testament to the organization's dedication to patients beyond just research. I think including patients, especially at the tail end when everyone's leaving very excited and invigorated and inspired by everything that they've learned and shared, and new collaborations from this meeting. I think it's a wonderful time to do it, and it's so exciting for the patients too. It makes them feel like they were a part of ECTRIMS too, which for many of us, it is the biggest conference of the year. So perfect timing and a perfect organization to do this, because what bigger platform is there for these diseases?
And while it might not be obvious to people who were there in person or online, the people that were on those panels were the heavy hitters in the business, if you will, in the research field, in the patient advocacy field. I mean, it's not often that you get the president of the National MS Society of the United States, and then all of the researchers who are at the top of their field together in a place, let alone together in a place where people who live with the conditions have access to ask questions and to listen and to hear at a scientific level what was discussed in the previous days. And when I say at the scientific level, they weren't trying to dumb things down. They were expecting the people who were there to come along on the journey and could explain things if they needed to. But the people who were there were the people in the room, both literally and virtually. The people who were in the room were the ones that the people that were at the table in the front were there for.
And I should also add that, the average patient isn't privy to this information. All the happenings of ECTRIMS is definitely disseminated amongst the scientific community after the fact, and it's accessible. But again, the average patient isn't a neuroscientist. They're not really involved in rare disease. They're in all kinds of different industries and whatnot. So we're not really exposed to all of what happens at these conferences. And I think it's so important for patients and their loved ones to see what's going on, what's being discussed, what kind of revelations have been made here. It provides so much hope and inspiration.
I think that overall, people living with multiple sclerosis, and I'm one of the people that didn't know about the other two conditions that were just spoken of today, and I like to think that I'm a fairly informed patient. But the people who are there, people who live with multiple sclerosis, tend to go pulling for knowledge, not just waiting for it to be pushed at them. So this kind of event, particularly for the MS community, is important because we're the ones looking to pull that information out.
I think it's worth noting, you talked about the fantastic panel that we had across the two sessions. It's worth noting that one of our podcast guests was also on one of those panels. So I wonder if you would, it's quite a unique perspective to be one of the people who's obviously there to receive some of the information, but also to give some of the information. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you?
An absolute privilege and an honor. I mean, I count my blessings every day that I'm well enough to be in a position where I can do this, where I can collect the information and then disseminate them to my community. And to be on stage with such accomplished and achieved clinicians in our field, I mean, I could have never imagined this for myself. So I feel so honored, so privileged, and really just very lucky that I can do all of this and sort of be the messenger for my community.
And as a person living with the condition but sitting in the audience, I found it very important, and Brett, as you put the panel together, there were at least 3 people on the panel who were professionals but also live with the conditions. And I think that that's a very important part because they can, as you did, Sumaira, sort of turn the microphone back and make sure that the people who were on the panel were addressing things in a manner that made sense to the people living with the condition.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were very lucky. You say you felt lucky. We were very lucky to have you as part of that event, and the other people, as you say, Trevis, living with those conditions, also to be part of the panels. Talked about the wide variety of scientific information that was presented. Let's skip to that now for a little bit. What were some of the highlights in terms of the things that you heard across the 2 sessions that will be your key messages that you'll take away when you go back and talk to members of each of these communities?
It's very refreshing and reassuring to hear all of these neurologists speaking about mental health and holistic health and nutrition with so much importance, because oftentimes when you're living with these diseases, you're so focused on, the treatments that we get and the testing and the imaging and all that very medical stuff. And sometimes we forget how important our diet is, how important our mental health is, our sleep health is. So to see those very people who are so invested in the science also giving so much importance to these areas of our health was, I think, a welcome change and very refreshing.
And as a person living with multiple sclerosis for a couple of decades now, it was really important for me to hear on a number of occasions that we are talking years, not decades, before something that has come up at this conference might come to fruition. We're talking about years, not decades, before the next thing. We're talking years, not decades, before remyelination could be something that there's a treatment for. We're talking years, not decades, because when I was first diagnosed, it was, we're talking decades now. Mm-hmm. So I think that things are happening much more rapidly, and events like the ECTRIMS event bring people together closer make that communication happen faster, so we don't have to wait until a paper is published before the next actors can take the stage. They're queuing up in the wings, ready to walk on because of this conference. And that was really impressive to know, and hopeful as well. And I'm a firm believer, and I may have coined the phrase, that hope without a plan is just a dream. And we live, all of us, with these conditions with a certain level of hope. We have to, just to get up and get through the next day. But today, and for me over the previous several days, I've seen a plan in place. So it's not just a dream. And we are talking years, not decades.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Thanks.
And how important do you think that last piece of the puzzle is in terms of putting it into a context as to what it means for people in the audience? Because we can talk about the updates in the science, we can talk about what's happening, but things like, realistically, this is a year or two away, or, this is what this is going to mean for you down the track. How important is it that that context is included in these discussions?
I think it's very important, because I think it will also reinforce that in the meantime, you need to take care of yourself in the other ways and, be the best patient that you can be, so that when those opportunities, for a lack of better words, do become available to you, you're in an even better sort of health situation to receive that.
I've often said that the most difficult steps in a journey are from the sofa to the door. And I think for people with multiple sclerosis and other rare conditions that were talked about, and I would say them, but I couldn't, it's alphabet soup to me right now. But as we look forward, we've all come to the door, and now there's a reason for us to get out the door. A healthier mind, a healthier body, recover better from anything. We know that. But now what we're being told, as Sumaira has said, is that maintaining and improving brain volume and physical health, etc., is putting us in a better place for when those new treatments are there for us. So I think it's something that we can do and be active in our care, not just on the intellectual level, but on the physical and the emotional levels as well.
And a lot was talked about today around the new format that was launched for Patient Community Day this year. I'd love to hear some thoughts around what you thought of the format, but also what you're looking forward to when we start to think ahead to Patient Community Day 2025 in Barcelona.
Well, it was incredible to see a room filled with patients and caregivers. I don't think there was an empty seat. So I was very impressed by how many people showed up in person, but I think more impressive how many people showed up online. From what I understood, there was over 1,000 folks who tuned in virtually. What I would love to see in 2025 is, I think we need to leverage the fact that we do have all of these patients tuning in and we have their attention. This would be a great opportunity to maybe get some information from the patients. We can survey them, do some audience participation and maybe some live polls to get an understanding of whatever it is we want to get an understanding of. But such a lovely opportunity to learn from our live audience.
And this was the first patient day at ECTRIMS that I have attended. So I think it appears that it was third time a charm. What I would like to see going forward is a midway point. In the next 6 months, have an online something or other where people can come together virtually and find out what's happened so far and why to be excited about the next patient event at ECTRIMS, sort of so that we're not just island hopping every year, that every 6 months there's some level of an update to create excitement, because this isn't the only place and the only time that research comes out. So let's keep us engaged as patients, as people living with MS. Keep us engaged, get us engaged at about the time that things start to slow down so that we're ready for the next one.
Mm-hmm. A perfect message. To finish, what about a message for people living with these conditions around what you would like to say to them in terms of taking advantage of these opportunities, being engaged in the research space?
I will speak directly to the NMOSD and MOGAD community that I know times are tough at times, of course. It's still tricky, especially MOGAD, with there not being any approved therapies, and NMOSD, there's still a high misdiagnosis rate. But please be encouraged by the fact that there is so much focus on NMOSD and MOGAD, not only at ECTRIMS, but almost virtually every MS or conference that I've now attended. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. These things take a long time to develop and evolve, but the future is quite bright, and we have a lot to look forward to in both of these diseases.
And I suppose to the MS community specifically, since moving to Europe, I've heard the term far too often, an MS sufferer. And engaging in events like this are a way that we can take away the suffering and be seen, see ourselves, but more importantly, be seen as people who are actively involved in our care, in our treatment, in our prognosis, and living as best we can while we try to make the path for those behind us a little bit better.
Well, I think that's perfect messages from both of you to finish on. I want to thank you both for contributing to the podcast and agreeing to talk to me today at the end of what has been a long, tiring 4 days to be able to sit down at the end of this and have this discussion. Fantastic, but I think fantastic for all of the people living with MS, living with NMOSD, living with MOGAD, to hear from the two of you around this event. I'm sure they will relate to it, and it's very meaningful. So thank you both very much.
And since it is the end, Brett, I just want to say, because I've been listening to the ECTRIMS podcasts all along, and I want to say thank you to you for your work today on the patient level. It was brilliant, and well done, ye.
Thank you very much.
I concur.
Thanks everyone for listening. Once again, I'm Brett Drummond, host of this podcast episode and co-founder of MSTranslate, an independent resource centre that aims to simplify the complex wealth of information about MS for the greater MS community. The ECTRIMS podcast is produced and hosted in collaboration with two key partners, MSTranslate and the MS Journal, a peer-reviewed international journal that focuses on MS, neuromyelitis optica, and other related autoimmune diseases of the central nervous system. The 2024-25 ECTRIMS podcast series is supported by educational grants from Alexian AstraZeneca Rare Disease and Novartis. Educational grant providers have no input in the podcast content. You can read more about the topic of this latest podcast episode and more on the ECTRIMS website, ectrims.eu. Do subscribe to the ECTRIMS podcast on your favourite podcast channels and follow ECTRIMS on X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube.